This podcast is based around the history and experiences of the infamous Shane Bugbee, recollected and retold by Shane Bugbee himself. Who is Shane? Well, you're about to find out. I'm your host, Nannerl, and this is Speak of the Devil.
Through the darkness of futures past, the magician longs to see. One chants out between two worlds, fire, walk with me. Tonight we walk the fire and speak of the devil. I'm your host, Nannerl, and when speaking of the devil, of course I mean the infamous Shane Bugbee, the last high priest appointed by Anton LaVey, and the last person who has ever interviewed LaVey.
So tell me how you met Anton LaVey.
Oh, well, publishing Might Is Right with him and threatening to tell the world that he plagiarized Might Is Right. Now, I have nothing but respect for Dr. LaVey. And at the time, I was just a young lad without knowledge of the art world, the immense knowledge I have of the art world today. And I think it's he didn't plagiarize anything. He was just an artist that sculpted with words, and he was sculpting a belief system of non-believers. He was sculpting the human race. He was a social engineer, and you do what you will, you by any means necessary, as some of the greats have said. So that's what LaVey was doing when he put together Might Is Right, or put together the Satanic Bible and took out all of the hate that was in Might Is Right and applied the brutal honesty of Might Is Right to the Satanic Bible.
Would you refer to LaVey as a magician?
Oh, absolutely. All artists are magicians. We are the highest form of magicians. We are the creators. Some people think that when they have, a lot of people, the compulsion to have children is actually the compulsion to build a decent nest, or to build something that would be a lure to attract people. And I think a lot of animals, like birds, if you watch them, they build lures to attract a mate. What I'm saying is birds are artists too. Animals, in their deepest sense, aren't the murderous thing that most Satanists look at as wolves. We're murderous. We're the alpha. We're the apex predator. But we're actually the higher form of animals are apex artists.
How does one get in touch with LaVey? Do you just... This is before the internet. Is it before the internet? It's before...
Oh, yeah.
Okay, when was this?
I think there was email happening then, but it was real base. Mm-hmm. How I got a hold of LaVey was I wrote a letter to him, basically, like I said, threatening to put. I was not threatening. It was a promise. I was going to publish Might Is Right, and I was going to market it towards Goths and Satanists. And I sent him $100, but not for a membership. And I made sure to put that in there. This is not for a membership. This is to get your attention. I know you're a busy man, and this is to pay you to read my proposal, which he did, and then he sent me a membership back, and I sent that membership right back to him and said, I don't want it. I'm not a member. I'm not a member of anything. And Blanche sent it back to me, laughing, going, "You are a Satanist. This is great. Just keep our membership that we're sending you as a gift. We know you didn't pay for it. Just keep the membership and use it as it will benefit you, behoove you. Use that membership as it might behoove you."
Eloquent.
Yeah, that was cool.
So after that, did you? So you received.
But you asked how. You asked how I was able to meet him, and that was just through accomplishment. I had a reputation in the underground at that time as a transgressive artist and a person who had published obscene materials, and LaVey was a real champion of transgressive artists and honesty and brutal truths that most people in society run away from or hide from or keep in their closets or carry out in a private sex club where no one else will see, or key exchanges and all that weird stuff.
Definitely
I think
things that LaVey likes.
Yeah, but I think he would have liked to see in a world that was on the outside, where you don't really have to hide it. You can be it. You don't have to be closeted. You can just be the person that you are.
Did you look him up in a phone book or ask around for his contact information? How did you get it?
That's funny. I think we got it from Peter Gillmore, who was running the website at the time, if it was available. But his P.O. box was available. Like people, there was flyers that would go around and say, give information on where to find more information about the Church of Satan. You would write the P.O. box. And if you were interested in joining the Church of Satan, they would send you an application before they even considered taking your money. It was from what I know, it still is somewhat a very exclusive club. They definitely interview you and make sure they get the crazies out of there.
Wow. Okay, that's something.
They don't let anyone join. And I'm not sure how it is today, but I know LaVey did not let anyone join. He was very selective about the people he let hand him money. And I thought that was really fucking cool. That was the start of me liking him. I was like, dude, that is cool.
Do you think that definitely defines being satanic? Is that exclusivity?
Well, I think what defines it is how LaVey defines it. I think LaVey defined it well enough that it doesn't need a lot of sideways actions, or it doesn't need a left wing or a right wing. He defined it in a way that's hard to add to that philosophy. I think philosophies become religion and they die when you stop adding to them. It is hard to add to LaVey's stuff. But yes. I think when he said you're born a Satanist and not, you can't be one, you can't buy in. I think that's true of so many things when you think about it. Like, you're truly talented as a cellist, let's say, right? You're talented. You can't buy your way in, maybe. Or you're truly talented as an artist. You can't buy your way in. Not everyone is the same. And I think that is just a brutal honesty. And I think it does define a Satan. That's part of what defines a Satanist. There's many layers.
After this encounter, did you continue contacting LaVey, or did he ever contact you again? After this letter? Yeah. We had a great exchange about the introduction, and it was all through fax. Kids don't know what a fax is. It's a piece of paper that comes through the phone line. A phone line that's plugged into your wall. I know it's wild, man. But it was a fax machine that we would correspond with, and it was pretty neat. So that was how we would correspond then. And I did get to visit him once at his house, and it was really fucking just, it's hard to put words to the emotions I felt being able to go into his house and visit him, a person is of a historic note. You're saying the Black Church, right? Yeah,
his Black House, the San Franciscan, whatever you call it, the Black Church, right, the Black House. I think we called it back in the day, we called Dr. LaVey's place the Black House. I don't know if it was called the Black Church, but that sounds good too.
So, did you take a bus there? Did you drive there?
Oh, yeah.
Did you take the BART?
So here's the deal. So I get Might Is Right published, and I'm like, when I get this published, I tell LaVey, I'm coming to your house and I'm dropping it off. I'm bringing you a copy. I didn't get necessarily an invite first. I'd tell them I'm coming there. And Blanche is like, hey, don't just show up. Let's make plans. And I said, hey, this book will be published around this time, and I want to hand it to you first. And so we made plans, and I went out there for the first anarchist book convention.
What year was this?
Oh boy, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. I don't know. I did things right when I was younger. And it's a blur, and I'm still moving forward. I don't even like to think about being younger or older. I like just to think about being. And so with the LaVey thing, I loaded up the truck and with the books, and I drove it out there to him, and it was really neat to hand it to him. I handed him Might Is Right, and boy, just now that's the visit. If you want to hear this story, I'm willing to tell you.
Definitely.
You want to hear this?
Yes.
Okay, so you drive up and you look for parking in San Francisco, and it's a neighborhood, and you walk around, it's like really modern homes, and then there's this old black house sitting there with a big fucking fence around it and barbed wire. And LaVey had a bodyguard named Tony, this short little Italian guy. And so they say the gate will be open. We come up the gate, we go up the stairs, and we knock on the door and wait, knock again, and all of a sudden the door, it's dark. There's no light on outside. It's fucking dark. So the door opens, and a hand comes out of the door, grabs me by the forearm, and pulls me in the door, and then slams the door. And we're in this dark hallway, and there's stacks of newspapers both sides of the hallway. So you have to walk sideways to get down to what would be like his living room or his meeting room. He had a big piano in there, and we go in there, and Blanche greets us. She's in there, and she's in baby blue, this baby blue outfit.
it, just like LaVey saw the perfect, I forget how he described this perfect satanic woman maybe, but the baby blue because women should be submissive. I think he had that trip, but I don't remember. And so she's all of this, and she sits us down, and LaVey comes in, and it's so fucking cool. He trots in there like just like this great performer, entertainer. He's full on, he's on a stage, he comes in through the side door, and Bugbee. And he goes, Bugbee, Schmidt and Hinkle. Bugbee, Schmidt and Hinkle. You could have a law firm with that name. You could really catch some ears. And I'm like, I love this guy because he's not talking like so many occult folks I'd met prior, which is intellectual masturbatory. Like, I'm going to show you how smart I am by using all these big words. LaVey was a fry cook, so he could relate to anyone. He was a real magician. He could read you and talk the intellectual talk, and he could talk the fry cook talk. So he says that, and then he puts the book down on his piano, and he picks it back up and goes, Bugbee, do you realize this is pure dynamite? You don't realize this, do you? You're putting pure dynamite on the streets, and I love it. And he slams the book down on the table. And then he walks me around his parlor, and he says, don't touch anything. And I touch everything he tells me not to touch on accident. It's like this compulsion. But he's like, this is Crowley's pipe. And I'm like, I touch it. And he's like, yeah, don't touch that. This is Rasputin's chair. And I touch it. And he goes, yeah, please don't touch it. This is the coffin that Susan Atkins from the Manson cult. Yes. There's famous photos of it, and I don't touch it. I touch it. So it was weird. I didn't do it on purpose, but it was where that altar is, where all the photos were. All these classic historic photos were in that room. And it's such a smaller room than the photos would lead you to believe. It looks like a huge area. It's not. It's small, but it's so cool. It's so cool to be there. And after the house was destroyed, I got a couple pieces of that altar were given to me.
Oh.
Yeah.
That is some bespoke relic there.
I know. Isn't it a shame that house was destroyed?
Do you know what? I moved to the Bay Area after the house was destroyed, and I was very devastated to find out it no longer existed. I had a friend who had told me years ago, if you ever go to San Francisco, you have to drive by LaVey's house and see it. And it was very sad to hear that it was gone and the reasons for it.
Yeah, and then I remember when Blanche was raising money for it, we all started to get behind her, and then there was basically a vote amongst the hierarchy saying this is totally anti-Anton LaVey. He wasn't for structures. He wasn't for this religious. He wasn't for, like these worship. And now that's what we're doing. We're making this a church. We're making this a point of worship, a point to pay attention to a building, not the philosophy. And I really like that argument, like, let it go. Poof, it's gone. But the philosophy remains. The thoughts remain. He's done his work. And he did his work for humanity's progress, not this greed, not this wanting to move people in one direction or the other, but to get people to understand how they are moved from one direction to another.
It also was his home and not a church for others. And I think that the fact that that was his lair, that was his, his cave, I think that it's very respectful that it went when he went.
Yeah. I think the whole thing turned out really cool, especially, I don't know how many years later, 20-some years later. It's just cool to see his influence is much like a Crowley influence, where it didn't just remain. It's grown to a point beyond his name. People, I guess I hear young people don't even know who he is. They don't have very much respect for him or care. And I think that's really neat, actually. Fuck the person. Let's talk about the thoughts and the stuff they put out there. And I'm not saying that totally. I'm a person, and I'd like people to, I'd like a little worship, but, just enough to get by. I guess I consider worship love, though. So I like a little love. I like love.
Would you equate worship to patronage or support of the arts for yourself as an artist?
I equate worship with oral sex, actually. So.
How about a big old cake and some tits?
Yeah, exactly. So I equate worship with something like that, like you're just into something, like you're suckling it. And I don't mean it just on a human being, like you're just into it, like worship. And you're groveling, your face is you're like a pig trough eating pie. That's worship. You're out of control. It's orgy is worship. So that's what I equate worship with. That's me, though.
But yeah, I think respect and patronage and all that stuff is part of something like that. Maybe that's not necessarily worship, but it's not something a minion does. It's something that someone who waters their garden, or I think patronage is a nurturing act, not a worshiping act. It's a nurturing act, and artists need to be nurtured. You know, when I talk about I want to be worshipped, it's from a really very personal, like I said, love. I like love and that affection, warmth of the human body. But for my art, I just want to be supported. I want it to be seen and heard. That's how it is. And oh boy, that LaVey night, going back to that house, I could keep going. I mean, it was we sat and talked to LaVey for 12 plus hours, I think, before we went to the first anarchist book convention. And I'll tell you, when we went to that book convention, we were told we were going to have problems. The anarchists were going to meet us there and hurt us because a Nazi hit in the afterward. You know, and LaVey wrote the foreword. And they did. And I came there from Chicago with the cop tear gas canisters I bought from a cop supply store. And I had them in my jacket. And I was prepared for these anarchists to come and get me. And they did. And I had my arms in my pockets ready to pull out my tear gas canister and drop it and then run out the back door. And they pick up Might Is Right. And then they pick up the rest of the obscene books I put out. And the guy's like, the leader of this crew is like, you couldn't be a Nazi. Look at the stuff you put out. And he shows it to his friends. And they're like, yeah, he's not a Nazi. He's just a troublemaker and stuff like that. He's a nihilist. They had all these other words for me. And then they left. They peacefully left. I was like, oh my God, that was great that they saw me. They heard me. They didn't just they were very thoughtful. They came there to do what they were going to do, and they were thoughtful about it. They analyzed it, and they walked away. And most people see a satanic Baphomet or something like that, and they want to use it to take their frustrations out on you, versus argue about the symbol. You know, it's more about their shortcomings in life. You know, war is probably mostly people's shortcomings in life versus, or like I said, a resource grab.
Do you think that the same incident at the anarchist bookstore, if that happened in 2019, in the digital age and the cancel culture and all these other, you know, you do something even if it's misconstrued, people take and run with reputations, and they get very upset easily now. Do you think that the anarchists would have reacted the same way?
Well, at the book convention, I think so. I think the kids today are very smart. I think online it becomes herd mentality, and people just go after. But I've seen that herd mentality devolve where people actually defend things and go, hey, this person apologized, you know, leave them alone. They're making right on things. Or that's a fake apology. Look they're still doing this. They're still this. So it's so transparent now. I think people can tell genuine. I think it's the same thing. I don't know. Online, you're going to run into intellectuals, but it's much like the concept of LaVey or Satanist. It's a 1%er club. And so those people are few and far between, it's true, and the ignorant voice drowns them out at times. But I have to live my life thinking that the intelligent voice prevails at some point. You know, you just have to persevere. If you're being attacked for your artwork, you have to persevere until the intelligent voice is heard. And I think you can have people can come around. Sometimes
even just merely being relevant or just existing to hold in your relevance is the most integral thing you can do. Continue doing your art. Because what are they going to do? Right, exactly. It's like, and I think that's something I was talking to you earlier about. Is like what makes me. I think we were talking like what makes me a devil versus LaVey being a devil. Who was the devil? Was it LaVey or was it me? And I was like trying to compete with LaVey and saying, well, one of the things is not participating in society as much as possible. And so for me, I struggle to not have to participate within society's boundaries, which means using an alarm clock, working as a fry cook. You know, LaVey, and I've been a plumber. LaVey was a fry cook. And once you escape that as an artist, you don't want to go backwards. You know, you want to, that's what a devil is. We're able to get away with it. We're able to not work as a fry cook or a plumber. And by any means necessary, as the artist goes. Yeah. I can see that. Do you think that everyone is their own devil? No, I don't. I think that's an award for people who have done something tangible and are actually. When you call me a devil, I take that as something I've earned because I've been run out of towns and I've survived. I've been over my 20
25-year career as an artist and a public Satanist, I'm still alive, and I've had death threats when I was younger almost every day, and I'm still doing what I do. I'm not, so I think that's an earned title. I think, like, when we talk of the Ozzy Osbourne album, Speak of the Devil, I don't think Ozzy Osbourne, I think when you call him a devil, he's earned that.
Yes.
I don't think necessarily the person selling Ozzy Osbourne t-shirts has earned the devil moniker, though the person selling Ozzy Osbourne t-shirts might be a Christian and go home and beat their child and then say they're forgiven, and their child might look at them like a devil because he's been programmed to see the devil as a bad thing. I see the devil as like Salvador Dali or Picasso or Rembrandt or Mozart. These are devils. They earned it.
I think that it's important to point out what you just said about a little ago regarding the One Percenters Club and how exclusive Satanism was in LaVey's time. It's amazing that we're in a time period of self-titling culture, and a lot of people decide who they are and are very open about it, versus years ago when you couldn't be so open about who you are. What do you think LaVey would think of that? What would LaVey think of now's culture of like newer sects of Satanism that, like, for example, TST or any even independent Satanists who just decide one day they are a Satanist?
Well, I wouldn't really care what LaVey thinks of it. I care what I think of it. I don't mean to be rude, but it's like LaVey is dead, and I don't know if he would think about too much of this. He's just not from this culture. What do I think of it? I think it's just the internet makes things seem different. But I think that's the same old, same old. Someone wears parachute pants in high school and has a weird haircut, and then they look back and go, what the fuck was I thinking wearing that stuff? I think
hey
there's a
man,
lot of
those kickwear are immortal pants.
I wore them, okay.
Me too.
Yeah. So I think you look back on your shit and you're like, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm a 50-year-old man and I'm still a public Satanist. Some people might think that's silly. Some people might think it's brave. I think it's just me being an artist. But I think there's a lot of people I grew up with in those 25 years who no longer do that. A lot of Satanists go to Buddhism or something else when they grow up, they say. When we grow up, we go to Buddhist beliefs. I'm not sure I would see things too much differently. I think the fashion is just overwhelming because there's a lot more idiots out there than there are one percenters. So you're going to see a lot of idiots with the same haircut, the bangs, the Betty Page haircut. You're going to see a lot of people do that because it's called monkey see, monkey do, right? And I find myself doing that when I'm on a bus. As I get older, I see younger people take a cool photo. I'm like, I want to be like that young, sexy kid. And I'm like, what am I thinking, you old bastard? And I'm
yeah, go back to your closet with your kickwear pants.
Yeah, exactly. So I catch myself doing it. It's just something that's innate in us, and that's because I'm older and there's other people driving the buses now, and they have a control of the trends and fashion and what's going on. And I'm so interested in the young culture because they're at the lead. I like to be around the lead. I don't want to be stagnant. I like to add to a philosophy. I want to add to my life, and that's about staying with the creators, the new stuff, what's new. It's easy to rest on a Betty Page haircut. It's not easy to let your frizzy Afrocentric hair go or not straighten it maybe, or your red hair. I don't know. I don't know. It's safer to go with the trend than to be yourself a lot of times.
That's very interesting and counterintuitive, it sounds like, especially involving Satanism. When I think of Satanism, I think of the outlier, or how about just the Hebraic root of the word Satan is like adversary.
Right. Oh, I totally agree with you there. I think that's what makes it so. That's what makes something like the Satanic Temple outrageous. Hey, I forgot to tell you about my LaVey story.
Yes, please.
I need to get this out. Part of this night we spent, he just played piano for us, and in his kitchen, and he had his whole kitchen was synthesizers.
Oh, that's a dream.
Yeah, and there's synthesizers all around, and then there's a refrigerator behind him and a sink, and it's just counter, and we sat at a counter and drank instant coffee and drank instant coffee and ate double stuffed Oreo cookies, and it was the coolest fucking thing. And then his little son Xerxes runs in the room, pops open the refrigerator, and it's the only time LaVey broke character. his face was always like in this character thing, and he's like, no, and he runs, he goes to slam the refrigerator door because we look in there, and of course we're making judgments, and there's a big gallon jug of Carlo Rossi wine, and I can't believe it's not butter. And I'm just like, and it was funny because he was like, no, and he pushes that door closed so quick because he didn't want us to see the secret stash of
Don't look at the man behind the curtain.
Yeah. So it was sort of funny. He didn't want to put humanity on himself.
No, I can't believe it's not butter,
Yeah.
Only Zool.
So I just had to tell you that part of it, but
I'm now thinking about him just becoming an exasperated dad. Just the transformation from this, this bespoke, this legendary figure to no!
yeah, right. That's exactly what it was. It was so funny. It was so funny. But it was cool to sit there and watch him play piano all night, and then he talked to us, and he knew how to wrap us around his finger. So he started to talk to me about this really, a lot of big words and a lot of occult talk. But it was stuff I had no clue of at the time. I was too young. And he looks at me, and then he starts talking about Elvis. And I'm like, oh, I love Elvis. And he goes, I thought so. So he knew how to wrap people around their fingers immediately. So he went on with this Elvis story. And Marilyn Manson had given him an Elvis Gacy painting. And then he looks over at the date I was with and says, he starts talking about dogs. And he tells a story about how he had a dog stolen and they cut the paws up, and he worked with the police on getting revenge on the person. And the date just falls. Oh, goodness, because she had been, really into dogs, and so he really just knew how to wrap people. He was like a fortune teller, but beyond, but the better fortune teller of the Americans.
He sounds like he was very perceptive, and he could just read people well.
Well, and what does a fry cook do? They have to read people, right? It's like a dominatrix or anyone else. Like if you're going to talk to a hairdresser, a dominatrix, a fry cook, that's what they do. They read people. Waitresses.
Producers of podcasts working with Shane.
Exactly. Yeah, you read people very well. So that's what's like. That's where the magicians are hiding. It's not the people who have come out of this privilege, who have the money to afford the fashion of it all, or the ranking in certain groups, like maybe a satanic temple. I hear that their group is full of people who pay. Their ranking is full of privilege, and I don't think those people understand how to read people. They've been taught what people are through a book, and I think it's a lot different. You have to. There's the occult for you. That's the unspoken. What is the guy? I could see by the look in your eyes, your lies. I can see your lies by the look in your eyes. That's how we read people, right? We feel it in our gut, and we see it in their eyes.
I think that with some of these groups, it's kind of like the phrase about putting lipstick on a pig, or it's just like, playing King of the Mountain. Sure, you can say, I'm the king of Meow Meowville, but your neighbor doesn't give a fuck. Who the fuck cares that you're the king of nothing? And, to have a figurehead or to appoint someone a figurehead, the only people it benefits is that group and that collective. But for people outside of their collective, these titles do not matter. And they may or may not matter 10 years from now. Will these people even care that they had these titles?
Oh, right. So true. It's like this club. It's like a club mentality. I heard,
Prom court.
Yeah, I mean, how does that work on your CV in the occult world? Well, I was even for me, how's that work in the tangible results in society for the most part? I was a priest in the church. I was a high priest in the Church of Satan or whatever. Mm-hmm. That works as an artist.
Yes.
But that works because I've survived for 30 years doing that. So it works for me now. Mm-hmm. But it wouldn't work for me as the plumber that came from that. It wouldn't work for LaVey the fry cook. That's what sort of helped make us who we are.
Yes.
Those things.
And as magicians, as artists, just as you're saying, you have to continue to grow and get yourself away from what lacked power. Continue gaining your power. And I think that's the most satanic thing you could do. You're hardly being satanic if you are, the self-appointed king of the mountain, but you still have to go clock in at the gas station tomorrow.
Yeah, no, or you're this leader of the satanic group or whatever. You're a leader. It's like that. You've just become religious in everything you're supposed to hate. Like, how does that work? I get administrative leaders, I guess, but all those titles are sort of gross. And when I had titles in that stuff, it made me feel weird about it. Then I felt strange about it, but because it became empowering only amongst a certain group, so I only hung out with that group. And then I saw this cult-like I was like, and this is the Church of Satan stuff I'm talking about, because then I only hang around Church of Satan people because they knew who I was or something like that. And then you have this fake sense of power, and it doesn't translate into reality. So it's a hobbled existence.
You're in a bubble.
Yeah, bubble. That's it. Exactly. You become in this bubble, and it's just really bizarre. And it does become cult-like when you're in this bubble. And that's where I came up with the idea, for myself, that's where philosophy dies, when it becomes a religion, when it has this bubble. Philosophies, if they're meant to be tested and beaten on and added to, but not worshipped. Not to sit there stagnant and go, this is the way it is. This is the way it is. I try to add the LaVey's stuff whenever I can, or the idea of Satanism, but I don't do it as a religion. I do it as something that respects where it came from. Like, this is where that came from, and I'd like to try to add to it. Does this make sense? And that kind of collective one mind kind of thing I dig. I dig adding to the future of humanity and their freedom. I like the concept of Satanism as being a freeing thing for humanity, not something that's going to capture people into donations and stuff like that.
Yes, and I think that freedom gets lost when everyone is bullied into saying the same thing or believing the same thing. Might as well not be a Satanist, is how I feel about that.
Yeah, or might as well be a Christian.
Some of it feels like the insular culture of church groups. You only hang out with your church people. Right, and
that's what the atheist movement became for a lot. Now they've been criticized for becoming very church-like, very, very rigid on their beliefs. And that's exactly becoming your church group. Church lady.
Well, that's special.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Isn't that special?
So you are the last person who ever got to interview LaVey. Did you interview him on the same visit that he gave you a personal synthesizer concert and had the butter in his fridge?
Oh, this is a good question. Okay, so I came there, and that was the idea. I told him part of my contract with him was to do an interview. When I get there, I'm like, I'm ready to do the interview, and he wouldn't record. I will not let you record the interview. You have to take notes. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, Vale from research. Him and his person came in, and they interviewed me and recorded a bunch of stuff, and they never turned over the tapes like they promised, so that's it for everyone. No one gets to record me at all. And if I ever see that little shit, he was real angry about Vale. Funny, I'll fast forward through this real quick and jump to the Anarchist Book Convention the next morning. Guess who I'm sitting next at the Anarchist Book Convention? Vale. So Vale, I just fell in love with LaVey that night. So I was totally in love with this as the artist, nothing to do with Satanism yet. And so Vale gets up and leaves, and LaVey is this old man, so I feel like doing justice for this old man. So Vale gets up from his table, and I pick up a bunch of books off his table and throw it in a garbage can. He comes back and goes, "Any idea what happened to those books?" I'm like, "Nope." And he finally found them. Someone said, "Look at all these books you got. Why'd you throw away these books?" He's like, "That's where they went." But to talk about the interview now, LaVey wanted to me to write the interview, transcribe it like journalists would, he'd say. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing that. And he's like, well, go ahead and take notes. And we'd ask questions all night of him. And I'm like, I'm not taking notes. He's like, well, you'll do this from memory. I'm like, no, I won't. Let's do this over the phone or through fax. I'll send you the questions through fax, and you send them back. But I'm not handwriting things like this. And he finally asked me, he's like, why won't you take notes? And I go, it's too submissive. I'm not doing it. I just want to put a recorder on. This is my process, and this is how I do it, and I'm not changing my process. And he said, I love this. He was like totally into it because I was firm in my ways. And, him and Blanche really dug me because of that, because I was like, yeah, I don't want the membership. I'm not doing shit your way. And they said I was a natural. A beast of the field, a natural Satanist. So I was like, I like those compliments, but nonetheless, I'm not going to take notes in an interview. I use a tape recorder. It'd be like some kid today, don't use the drone for the footage. Let's use a broomstick to get the footage. Kids are going to be like, yeah, fuck you, dude. I'm going to use a drone, or I'm not going to shoot this shot. I just wanted to use my tape recorder. Anyway, the interview is cool. It's on the Church of Satan website. They have it up there to this day.
Oh, nice.
And it's the last interview that was done with LaVey. I do remember like talking to him about stuff and asking him about the Nazis that wrote the afterword for Might Is Right. And he wasn't and I think he answers in that interview as well. He answers similar. I believe it's a long time and I don't remember the specific answers. Mm-hmm. But I do know that he said, well, they're predisposed to those beliefs because of their upbringing, because of the zip codes they were born into, and that does not fit our belief here. But he didn't chastise them. He just said, we don't roll that route. I think the one thing that's really cool about the Church of Satan and what LaVey put down is he had anti-hate clauses in his belief system or his church, where it's like, we don't hate people because of how they are, their sexuality or their color. We hate them because they're ignorant. Boy, as a person who always has believed himself as an intellectual and an artist, that was just dreamy to me. There's where he got me. That was one of the clauses in his belief system. I don't want to call it a belief system though. His doctrine mm-hmm. that I just fell in love with because I was like, yeah, right. That makes so much sense to me. I didn't even understand it, but I didn't understand racial issues, but I did growing up in a lower class white area. I understood people communicating racial issues, but I didn't really understand them. I was like, I like this guy. I don't know why you're talking bad about him. I like public enemy. I like this stuff. And so when he said that, I was like, that makes sense for me. And that was a really cool part of his doctrine.
I feel like a lot of that still makes sense. However, a lot of it has been twisted lately to the point of diminishing and defanging LaVey and what he contributed to Church of Satan and Satanism.
Really? How? How has it? I'm not saying it hasn't. I just haven't been.
Oh.
I don't keep my nose up the goat's ass. I'm not paying attention to this stuff the whole time.
I see.
And you're a younger person, so your interest in it was my interest when I was your age, probably, or something like that.
I see. Listeners, if you're wondering, I'm in my mid-30s, and I feel like the major demographic right now who are actively on the internet talking about Satanism, arguing about Satanism, repping the TST, being against the TST, etc. I know someone's going to give me flack for saying the TST. You should clap back and come at me, cash me outside. How about that? Anyway, yeah. I think the majority demographic regarding Satanism right now on the internet is somewhere in between 28 and 35 years old. And then, there's the outlier, maybe in their 40s. But I think I'm the general mean of age-wise. So that's interesting that you point that out. Anyway, I think that a lot of people diminish LaVey oftentimes by dead-naming him. A lot of times referring to him as Howard. Okay, that's his real name, but why does that matter to call him Howard? Why does that matter to diminish his accomplishments when, what have you done? And it's interesting that a lot of podcasts regarding cults or regarding just talking about general stuff, and they look for something to talk about, and so then when they talk about Church of Satan, I'm not talking about any satanic podcast. I'm talking about just other podcasts that are completely different. A lot of times it gets diminished a lot of times by these people as just this weird nerd. They sort of portray LaVey because of words like lair being used, but also I think that because they're not from his time. And so LaVey often gets called Howard. He often gets called problematic because he's from the silent generation. Being a man who had his prime in the 60s when, there was a different standard of beauty. There was a different expectation of gender roles. And he was very different from the counterculture movement that was coming along in the 60s. So I think because he contrasted vastly from that, he often gets a weird rap as being, a weird nerd or an outlier, which is both good and bad, but I can't believe sometimes how people call him Howard.
Well, that happened even in his day. I think it's interesting what you're saying. Yeah, I think it's interesting what you're saying about all this stuff, though. But oh yeah, back even when he was around, people in the COS call him Dr. LaVey. And that's what we would address him as. And then people that were possibly turned down, most likely didn't make the cut, would say he's not a doctor. He's not an actual doctor. Well, he was to us. He was a genius. To see him as anything else is to be an ignorant asshole. I mean, the guy was a genius, and that doesn't. The genius of the 30s doesn't always play in the genius of the 2000s, right? So history is weird how that works, but he was, and you're standing on his path, something he blazed. So it's like at some point, I think you respect your history, or you're probably not actually part of that history. You're just a fashion. There's the original term for hipsters, which I loved, was like jazz musicians, zoot suit artists. The trans movement would be considered a hipster movement in the old days. And it's not fashionable. It's people getting their ass beaten for who they want to be in their expression. Without LaVey and the free thought movement, you wouldn't have transgender rights. You wouldn't have gay marriage. He was one of the people who helped pull down those walls. All of the people in the 60s, from Abby Hoffman, the Yippie movement, the Black Panthers, the Church of Satan, they all helped pull down the moral oppression that was the religious in God we trust bullshit in this country. I mean, so if people don't want to respect that, they're probably not paying attention. They're probably fashions, and in 3 or 4 years they will be doing something else. They will put away their dark knight cape and their Baphomet stuff, and
they'll become a Buddhist.
Yeah, well they'll join society for certain. They'll live a couple years as a struggling artist with their parents helping pay their bills. And then they'll move along and take the challenge of a mortgage and own a home and 2 cars and work really hard for all of these trinkets, and so I don't really have a lot of respect for people who talk shit but don't do much. Where is their accomplishment?
This sounds very much like what happened to the hippies. Yeah,
exactly. And the hippies did a lot for us. I mean, everyone's eating kale and fucking protein burgers now because of the hippies. So they're the ones who pushed kale down our throats. And I love kale. I eat it all the time.
Me too.
I'm happy to be acquainted with kale salads and stuff. Rub that with some nice avocado and lemon. Wow. Thank you, hippie.
Thank you, hippie. And thank you, Shane.
Oh, thank you.
So we've come to the end of our time. Shane, I want to sincerely thank you for sharing your experiences with LaVey. No one can say what you said and have been there. So thank you so much. If you would like to find out more about Shane Bugbee, you should go to shanebugbee.com. If you have any questions regarding this episode, maybe about LaVey, maybe you want to clap back about those kickwear pants, you can contact us at
speakofthedevilpod@gmail.com.
Nannerl,
yes.
It is just nothing but an honor to be in your e-presence. Your intelligence is overwhelming, and I'm always, it's just an honor to work with you.
I sincerely appreciate it as well, and we will continue circle jerking ourselves off the air as well.
Oh, I'm not. You're funny.
I'll bring the cake and tits and the kickwear pants, and we'll
all right.
save a seat open with some Oreos for LaVey.
Yes, double stuffed.
Double stuffed.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and tune into our next episode wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. You can find us at Speak of the Devil Pod on Twitter and contact us at speakofthedevilpod@gmail.com. For Shane's artwork or to support his endeavors, please visit shanebugbee.com or find him on Twitter at ShaneBugbee. I've been Nannerl. Have a good one.
Oh, and ShaneIsTheDevil.com.